Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President and General Manager, Security Business Unit, Juniper Networks, Nawaf Bitar.
May you live in interesting times. Blessing or curse, like it or not, we do indeed live in interesting times. Our privacy is being invaded. Our intellectual property is being stolen. The public trust is at an all-time low. The attack on our information is outrageous. But you know what? I don't think we give a damn. I'm fed up with talking about outrage. It's easy to talk about outrage. This is outrage. This is John Pagliacci. He escaped from Tibet in 2006. At a recent demonstration in New Delhi, he lit himself on fire. He was protesting China's rule of Tibet. Supporters tried to extinguish the flames with Tibetan flags, but not before he was burned over 98% of his body. He died 2 days later. He wasn't the only one who sacrificed himself. 80 others did the same thing over a 2-year period. They were outraged. This man was also outraged. Nelson Mandela spent 21 years in damp concrete prison cells. He wasn't even able to attend his own son's funeral. Under pressure in 1985, President P.W. Botha offered him freedom, but on one condition. Mandela had to renounce his views on violent protest. He responded angrily. "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts." He declined the offer and spent another 5 years in jail. He was outraged. This is also outrage. Despite seeing the violence in Tiananmen Square the day before, this man stepped in front of a column of tanks. As the lead tank tried to move around him, he continued to step into its path. Finally, the tank shut down its engines, and the others followed suit. They sat together in eerie silence. He was soon pulled away by 2 men. We don't know what happened next. He was faceless, he was nameless, and he was outraged. This is not outrage. Liking a cause on Facebook is not outrage. Retweeting a link is not outrage. Posting a bad review is not outrage. Not showing up at a conference is not outrage. These are all examples of a new American disease, first world outrage. We should be outraged. Nation-state attacks against our companies are putting our jobs and our economy at risk. Cyber attacks that steal our personal information are a daily occurrence. Our information is one of our most important possessions, and we should treat it as such. Instead, what do? We pour on some more of that hashtag first world outrage. We have first world protests. We make documentaries about the horrors of fast food while consuming it in excess and record quantities. We like things on Facebook, demonstrating faux concern for things that we have never touched, felt, or experienced. And then we have the audacity to be shocked by the privacy revelations of late. A year before the Snowden leaks, in May of 2012, Wired magazine ran this cover story. The NSA is building the country's biggest spy center. Watch what you say. The article was about this data center in the Utah desert, 5 times the size of the US Capitol building. It was designed to process, not store, yottabytes of data. An official said, "Everybody's a target. Everybody with communication is a target. In a nutshell, we were explicitly told that we would be spied upon. And let's not kid ourselves. This is but one example of many. There are data centers and data closets all over the world collecting an unprecedented amount of our personal information. And who's to say how this will be used, whether it may be used against us in the future? Isn't that a violation of our fundamental rights? And that leads me to the most dangerous plague of all: apathy. When 20 children were killed in Newtown, what really changed? When the financial industry pushed toxic mortgages onto unsuspecting investors, what really changed? We now know with stunning clarity how deeply our privacy is being invaded. What's really changing? You in this room have the prowess and capital to demand better. Yet we stand by, watching our privacy erode, our information stolen, and our livelihoods threatened. We're complicit. Standing by and watching a crime without trying to stop that crime can itself be a crime. I believe we will only be moved to action when our real, not our stated values, are under attack. Obviously, privacy is not one of those. It's long gone. Sadly, behind the smokescreen of first world outrage, there seem to be only two things we care about. The first is family, and the second, money. If the safety of our children or our loved ones were at stake, we would fight back. If the Snowden revelations caused our tax rates to rise to 90%, there would be rioting in the streets. In addition to family and money, I think it's high time we added our information to the list of things that we care about. So what can we do? Today I'm going to tell you 3 stories that we might learn from. This is Vienna General Hospital. In the 1840s, it was arguably the best hospital in the land. But Vienna General had a big problem. It was killing mothers. Today, having a baby is practically outpatient. The maternal death rate in the developed world is about 1 in 10,000. Back then, childbirth was extremely dangerous. Healthy women would show up at a hospital and inexplicably die within days. And to make matters more puzzling, the best hospitals were killing the most mothers. Over 10% were dying. And yet, at another clinic, still part of Vienna General, but run by midwives, the maternal death rate was less than 4%, less than half. Doctors were hunting for answers and coming up empty. Enter Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor teaching medicine in Vienna. He became fixated on trying to understand what was killing the mothers. Every doctor had a theory. Some blamed air quality, others blamed overcrowding, others blamed the old standby, religion. Semmelweis spent months chasing down theories. They all led to dead ends. Finally, he happened on the answer by accident. A fellow surgeon overseeing an autopsy cut himself and died days later of the exact same symptoms the mothers were suffering from. On a hunch, Semmelweis instituted a new policy. He insisted that doctors wash their hands in a chlorine solution when leaving the autopsy room and headed to surgery. So obvious today. Back then, hygiene was not a priority. Doctors practiced in unsanitary conditions. Surgeons referred to the good old surgical stink. A stained, bloody apron was a badge of honor. Hand washing, simple hand washing did the trick. Mortality from childbed fever dropped to less than 2%. But strangely, instead of receiving accolades, Semmelweis was scorned. The medical profession questioned his conclusions. His supervisors didn't believe him. He was passed over for a promotion at the hospital. Discredited and shamed, he returned to Budapest, and he took his methods to a far more primitive hospital. And guess what? He replicated his results. In far worse conditions, death from childbed fever dropped to less than 1%. The medical profession continued to ridicule him. In 1865, he suffered a nervous breakdown and died in a mental institution 2 years later. That same year, a doctor in England began spraying carbolic acid solution during surgery to kill germs. And it was he, Dr. Joseph Lister, that finally gave Semmelweis his due. He validated his theory of germs. Today, Dr. Lister is immortalized in your mouthwash, and Semmelweis is finally recognized in currency. Semmelweis teaches us about the rejection of the unfamiliar, a behavior so pervasive that it even has a name. In the medical profession, it is known as the Semmelweis reflex. And the Semmelweis reflex is alive and well in our industry in cybersecurity. We continue to cling to old ideas, even in the face of obvious deficiencies and limitations. For example, we espouse the signature approach to eradicating known viruses. Today, we all know it's far from perfect. And worse yet, innovation is often met with harsh skepticism. How can that be? We are an industry of innovators. How can we stifle innovation? Don't get me wrong. Every new technique deserves scrutiny, and every bad idea needs to be challenged. But we must be careful not to dismiss too quickly, for it is the incomplete and partial solutions of today that will lead to the breakthroughs of the future. In the world of medicine, people have won Nobel Prizes for less. That preeminent institution in Vienna was killing mothers at an alarming rate. Medicine was as fledgling back then as cybersecurity is today. Semmelweis knew something was wrong. We know it too. There is a Semmelweis in this room today. You know who you are. If you have an approach that challenges convention, don't be quiet. Speak up. Get loud. We will eventually listen. My second story is about unintended consequences. In intelligence circles, when an action has an unintended effect, it's known as blowback. In March of 1900, there was some serious blowback. In what seemed like an innocuous request at the time, Frederick Hudson asked to sit on a chair, and he started a war. He was a British governor visiting the Ashanti tribe in present-day Ghana, a tribe that had just been conquered. The symbol of the Ashanti chief was the golden stool. The governor was determined to take the stool back to his queen. On his arrival, he was dismayed by the ordinary seat that he was offered. He said, "Where is the golden stool? I am the representative of the paramount power. Why have you relegated me to this ordinary chair?" Sir Frederick, unfortunately, didn't realize that the stool was sacred. It was believed to house the souls of the living, the dead, and the yet to be born. As you might imagine, his comments were not well received. And to the Queen of the Ashanti, they meant war. She raised an army and she attacked the British. The British fled to this fort. The Ashanti continued to snipe at them, cut their telegraph wires, and blockade the food. Eventually, the British were rescued. They fled from the fort, chased by 12,000 Ashanti warriors. The few survivors sailed home. Thousands died, all because of this single stool, a stool that no Briton ever sat on. It's often impossible to foresee what might trigger a catastrophe. Only looking backwards does it become clear. After 9/11, the government built a surveillance network to stop terrorist attacks. The goal was noble: but the consequence is an information collection system the likes of which the world has never seen. Fast forward to today, and we have direct evidence of the depth and breadth of information collection, the metadata of our phone calls, backdoor access to systems, deciphering encryption keys, spying on companies, spying on everyone. Surely, this is an unintended consequence of a well-intended action. We must be concerned about the massive collection of data. We also should be concerned about the concentration and the longevity. But we also should be concerned about the changing threat landscape. Over the past 5 years, there have been attacks against nuclear sites, power grids, the intellectual properties of companies, sometimes for profit, sometimes by hacktivists, and more often now by nations seeking to exploit weakness in the cyber fabric of other nations. We are watching these attacks increase in sophistication and in the damage that they do. Government officials even admitted last year that cyber attacks posed a greater threat to us than terrorism. What will the unintended consequences be of continuing to treat attacks of cyber warfare differently than those of conventional warfare? What will happen when one of those attacks jumps the fire road and real people die? One of these attacks will become a modern-day golden stool. A cyber attack unchecked will lead to real war. If an enemy shot down one of our passenger airliners, we would go to war. If a nation state compromised our air traffic control system and 2 of those passenger airliners collided, would we not also go to war? As Albert Einstein so presciently said, I don't know what weapons will be used in the next world war, but the one after will be fought with sticks and stones. My final story is about taking action. This is Henry David Thoreau. Had Thoreau been alive today, he may well have been a hacker, channeling his bold ideas through the keyboard instead of the pen. Even his appearance went against the grain. That neckbeard he is sporting was not the look of the day. He insisted that women found it attractive. There's one thing I'm certain of, nobody has found that attractive. Fortunately, what he lacked in fashion sense, he made up for in grand ideas. Thoreau spent 2 years living in the woods in this modest cabin where he wrote his epic book, Walden. The poet Robert Frost said, in one book, he has surpassed everything we have had in America. Thoreau had refused to pay his taxes in opposition to slavery. One day, he ran into the taxman, and he was promptly thrown in jail. And he would have stayed there had his aunt not paid his taxes on his behalf and against his wishes. The taxation incident had a profound effect on him. He wrote the essay, Resistance to Civil Government. And it was this essay that sparked the nonviolent protest movement, inspiring the likes of Dr. King and Gandhi. And it was this essay that sparked one of the most notable nonviolent protests of our time. It happened just 4 miles from here on Alcatraz Island. Native Americans staged a protest. An 1868 treaty specified that any abandoned federal land would be returned to the natives from whom it was taken. Since Alcatraz had been declared federal surplus in 1964, the Native Americans saw an opportunity to invoke the treaty and reclaim Alcatraz for themselves. It was November of 1969, and a man named Adam Fortunate Eagle and a group of Native Americans showed up on Alcatraz and took it over. The government tried to throw them off. The Native American response practically dared the government to use force. They said, "We and all other oppressed peoples would welcome spectacle of proof before the world of your title by genocide. Nevertheless, we seek peace." The protest went on for 19 months, And finally, in June of 1971, the last remaining people were removed from the island. The Native Americans lost that battle, but they won the war. Their protest had a profound effect on government policy. They had reached the breaking point. Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Dr. King, they all had reached the breaking point too. Grave injustice cannot and will not be tolerated forever. Our industry is under attack from all manner of foes: criminal organizations, corporate thieves, hostile governments, friendly governments. Haven't we reached our breaking point? When will we say enough is enough? Our information is being stolen. While we may not know the unintended consequences of that theft, we know there will be consequences. As corporations, as individuals and citizens, we should be truly outraged, not first world outraged. The time for apathy is over. We cannot go on the offensive and hack back. We would lose the moral high ground. But we can no longer remain passive. It's time for a new type of defense, a type of active defense that disrupts the economics of hacking and challenges convention, a type of defense that interferes with the attackers, a type of defense that breaks algorithms, a type of defense that disrupts data collection. It's time for all of us to turn the tables on the attackers. Or we can do nothing. We can continue to turn the other cheek, and we can passively wait for the next world war to begin in Silicon Valley. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, to present the award